Good evening. I call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Planning Committee of the City of Cambridge. There are two portions to tonight's meeting. The first portion are the public meetings. I will call up the applicant, and after the applicant, anyone wishing to speak will be given the opportunity. There is no debate of any of the items in the public meetings. The second part of tonight's meeting, I will call up the delegations. Each person will be allowed 5 minutes to speak unless they are representing 3 or more individuals in the audience. Then they will be allowed 15 minutes to speak. Planning and Development Committee will consider all oral and written comments prior to making a decision on a planning application. I will call upon staff to present their presentations, then the committee will have the opportunity to ask questions. Once staff has presented, I will call upon the applicant to present. Once the applicant has presented, committee will again be able to ask questions. To the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will move forward. The first public meeting tonight, public meeting A, is 215 Allendale Road and 245 Riverbank Drive. It will be staff presentation by Kathy Pageant, our senior planner. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, Planning and Development Committee, senior staff, and members of the public. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act for Creekside Phase 2 Industrial Plan of Subdivision. The purpose of this meeting is to introduce the proposed application. Notice of this public meeting was given in accordance with the Planning Act. Interested parties are encouraged to sign the register located in the lower level entrance in order to receive future notifications regarding this proposal. The subject lands are located at 215 Allendale Road and 245 Riverbank Drive, which is south of Allendale Road, east of Riverbank Drive, and north of Freeport Creek. The applicant is proposing an industrial plan of subdivision consisting of 7 industrial blocks and 1 future development block on a future public road. As you may recall, these lands have been pre-designated and pre-zoned through city-initiated amendments to get these lands shovel-ready for large lot employment uses. The 8 blocks do not have proposed uses yet, which will be further reviewed at the site plan review stage for conformity with the official plan and zoning bylaw. The property subject to the proposed draft plan of subdivision consists of approximately 21 hectares or 51 acres of land. You'll see on the image the Creekside Phase 1 lands are located just to the south, and the additional lands owned by the applicant to the west are not being considered as part of this industrial plan of subdivision. The following considerations will be evaluated in a future recommendation report: conformity to the site-specific official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, the future north-south collector road, servicing, environmental considerations, Planning Act provisions, and public and agency input. The recommendation being made today is for this report to be referred back to staff for a subsequent report and recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to the committee. Do we have questions? Seeing none, I thank you for your report. And now I'd like to call up our consultant, Dan Curry from MHBC Planning. Welcome, Mr. Curry.
Thank you, Chair Reid, members of committee. Nice to see you, by the way. It's happy 2019. I don't think I've been here since earlier in the fall, so nice to see you. I can be relatively brief, which is probably a good thing given the weather. Really this application is a plan of subdivision, and as Kathy said, it implements the planning that particularly the city and the region have been doing in this part of the city for a number of years. And really, this application, we're following the city-initiated process, the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments that were considered by council about a year ago that put in place the official plan designations and the zoning. And we've had pre-consultation, et cetera, and now we're at the public meeting part of the process. I think you know where the lands are. The point to this slide, really, the plan of subdivision is in the area outlined in red, and the land's in yellow. That's Intermarket's first phase subdivision, which was approved several years ago. They're proceeding through the registration process. So this is really an extension of the Cambridge North Business Park lands. I'll skip over the planning context, or just be very brief. Kathy covered it. The lands are already designated, both in the regional official plan, the city's official plan, for business park and industrial uses. The only point I really want to make is that the official plan amendments that were recently approved about a year ago, they apply slightly different policy framework on the subject lands. The western portion, which is adjacent to the existing residential lands along Riverbank Drive, has a slightly different policy framework that requires greater setbacks, and really it's puts in place some policies that allow for a transition between the balance of the industrial lands out in this area and the residential lots on Riverbank Drive. And so that's something that this plan of subdivision has to adhere to and conform to. The balance of the lands are the I'll call the more basic industrial designation. The zoning simply follows that. And so the draft plan of subdivision, it's really not very complicated either. It's Intermarket Road, which will ultimately connect through the Phase 1 lands to King Street and connect to Allendale Road, is planned to really split the lands in two. And so what's proposed are 3 industrial blocks on the west side, 4 industrial blocks on the east side, and there's a future development block here. The lines at the south end of the plan of subdivision indicate the limits of the environmental area and the limits of the floodplain. So the developable portions of the land are outside of those constraint areas. Ultimately, as Kathy mentioned, future development will be required to come forward through the site plan approval process. This is just conceptual in nature, but a urban design brief was submitted as part of the application. But it's just to demonstrate that, the development of the blocks, particularly on the west side of Intermarket Road, these 3 here, can be developed for buildings of a size suitable for business park and industrial development, and still meet those policy and zoning regulations around setback from the residential area, etc. And they can. As part of the submission, there were a number of technical and background studies that have been submitted to staff. We're in the process now. Staff are reviewing those. And then ultimately this will come back to council for a decision. In conclusion, really the main point is that this draft plan of subdivision implements that planning. It's consistent with the regional policy framework, the city's recently approved policy framework, and the zoning for the lands. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. We do have some questions. Councillor Liggett.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's actually a comment, and it would be more for Kathy. I'm sorry, I hadn't thought about it then. So, so if you would just give me a couple of minutes here. When we discussed this before, What I'm not seeing in here under existing surrounding land uses or even conclusion, the considerations of the review of the application, there was quite an in-depth discussion about the heritage aspects, particularly on the scenic route, and that they be remembered as part of the process for the development in this area. But I'm seeing it missing from the report in any shape or form. I just don't want it to get lost in the bigger picture here. I don't have any problems with any of this other than the fact that that part is missing from this document. So
Ms. Paget, could you respond to that?
Through you, Madam Chair, the land south of Allendale Road in the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment, we did include that there will be no direct access to Riverbank Drive, so we will be enforcing that through this application. And there will also be no changes to Riverbank Drive, and there's also no heritage properties on the south side. There is a heritage property adjacent to at the Hofstetter Farm, so there may be an HIA required for that, but I will definitely speak to that in a future recommendation report.
Thank you. Do you have further?
thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure, because I didn't see it under the conclusion of consultation or thought process or under surrounding land. So I just want to make sure it's still there in the picture, that it doesn't drop off and later on we say, oh my God, we should have remembered to do that. Okay, thanks.
Definitely.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Now, any further questions? Seeing none, I thank you for your presentation, Mr. Curry.
Thank you.
And now it's an opportunity for anybody in the public to present. If you wish to say something about this development, then please come forward, give us your name and address.
Good evening, councillors, Mrs. Mayor. My name is Richard Steeb. I live at 159 Riverbank Drive in Cambridge. Excuse me. I'm a little puzzled at the properties. If we could get them up on the screen. Actually, it's the one adjoining Riverbank Drive that has future residential on it. And I spent most of the afternoon going through my computer and through the whole list and reading all the information, and I come across a map showing 27 lots on that piece of property with access to Riverbank Drive and also an emergency access to Intermarket Road. And when the Freeport Creek properties were discussed at these meetings, that was future development, that residential area. And there was never any blueprint as to what they're going to do with it, how many lots or anything like that. But that shows up now on the Creekside properties. So to me, it's a little confusing and a little suspicious as to, are they going to shoehorn this thing in once everything is approved? That's my question.
And I hear you very clearly about your concerns. And so I'd like Ms. Paget, if you could respond to his concerns. She's coming forward.
Through you, Madam Chair, the lands that are being referenced are the lands to the west of the subject lands that are a part of this industrial plan of subdivision. The applicant has been identifying them as future residential lands. There's no application formally made to the planning department for us to consider. We have we're only focusing this on the industrial lands. The work that was done, the city-initiated amendments were for industrial lands and did not include this residential portion. It's outside of the urban area boundary, and there are ongoing provincial policy, regional policy for these lands, so they're not being considered at this time. There's no application. And I don't know if Dan would like to speak further to that.
The person who came forward, I'm sorry, sir, is that sufficient? Do you understand what's happening?
Not really.
Okay. Want to give Mr. Curry a try?
Sure. So the lands in question that are identified as future development lands are owned by Intermarket. They're part of this parcel of land. They're in a different land use designation. They're designated rural residential, similar to the rest of the properties on Riverbank Drive. They're not designated for industrial development, so this draft plan of subdivision doesn't include those lands because of that difference. Intermarket certainly is interested in developing something there. Residential would be the appropriate use. At some point in the future, I anticipate that they will come forward, but at present, they're dealing with the industrial plan of subdivision, and there's a number of issues that have to get resolved before an application could even be considered on the residential portion. So that's why it's identified as future residential. The concept plan showing I'm sorry, I forget what the number was, 23, 27 residential units at this point is simply a concept.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Okay, sir. So what they're saying is that there is no application at this point in time, so we cannot deal with the residential portion of that. Does that help?
Yes, I understand that, but perhaps for information purposes, that parcel of land fronting on Riverbank Drive, that's in accordance with the existing bylaws, and the existing bylaws state a 30-meter frontage for each lot. And I don't see that here.
Well, the residential, you wouldn't see anything because there's no application. It's just saying that portion would be for future development.
Well, they're showing 27 lots in less than 30 meters of frontage for each lot.
That's a concept.
It's just confusing. I just want to understand it.
Okay, as I understand it, that's a concept only, and it's not written in stone. When an application comes forward, then there would be a public meeting like there is tonight on that application, in which you would have ample notice of what is actually being proposed. But tonight there is no application, no proposal, other than it makes sense that it would probably be a residential area.
But yet, all the lots show up on the on this draft plan that I saw on my computer, and yet it didn't show up on the Freeport properties, Freeport Creek properties.
Well,
It's just confusing to me. But anyway, if we're going to see what's going on there at a future date, thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to reassure you, absolutely, you will be getting notice and you will see exactly what is being proposed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else who would like to speak at this public meeting? Seeing none, then I think we're ready for the motion. Councillor Adshay?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Montero, that report 19-016 CD, public meeting report 215 Allendale Road and 245 Riverbank Drive, industrial draft plan of subdivision, Intermarkets CAM Limited, Ward 1, be referred back to staff for a subsequent report and recommendation.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. I declare public meeting A closed. We move to public meeting B on 264 Millview Street. The presentation will be done by Malcolm Duncan, planning technician. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, senior staff, and the public. I'm here to present the planning application for 264 Millview Street. Notice was submitted in accordance with the Planning Act, and please ensure to sign the register on the main floor to receive future notification of this proposal. The subject property is located on the south side of Millview Street, east of Bechdel Street and west of Weaver Street. The current residential zoning limits the use of the land to a single detached dwelling with one driveway. The proposal is to convert the house into a duplex and keep the second driveway. No exterior additions or exterior site alterations are proposed, and interior alterations will be required to convert the house into a duplex. The rationale for the proposal, the bylaw that was passed in June 2018 to allow second dwelling units allows these units in single detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwellings. The applicant is proposing 3 bedrooms in each of the units in the duplex, which exceeds the maximum number of bedrooms allowed for a second dwelling unit. Therefore, an amendment is required to allow a duplex. For the driveways, there are 2 existing driveways on the property. The Committee of Adjustment approved a severance on the property in order, and with a condition to remove one of the 2 driveways. This is in accordance with a section of our zoning bylaw, which only allows 1 driveway per property, or was interpreted to only allow 1 driveway per property. And if the amendment is approved, the applicant will have to go back to the Committee of Adjustment to remove this condition. So here's an image of the existing house that's going to be converted into a duplex if this is approved. And a sketch of the severance showing the 2 driveways, the existing house on the north, which is outlined in red. Considerations for this property will be, or for this proposal, will be the location of the required parking spaces, being the 2 driveways, proximity to amenities such as parks and transportation, and compatibility with the neighborhood. And the recommendation is that the report be referred back to staff for a subsequent report and recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. To the committee, are there any questions that you would like to put forward? Seeing none, I thank you for your presentation. And now I have the consultant, Sarah Code, from the GSP Group. Welcome, Ms. Code.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of committee. My name is Sarah Code, planner with GSP Group. I'm here this evening on behalf of the owner. Don't have a formal presentation for you this evening, but I would be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
We do. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was before us really recently. So it's the same owner?
Correct.
So I'm wondering, why didn't they ask for this back then?
Can you clarify what you mean by back then? It was at the Committee of Adjustment, not Planning Committee.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I missed that part. Right. Okay. All right. I take that all back. Thanks.
I have no further questions, so thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
And now it's the public's turn. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this planning application? Seeing none, I think we're ready for the motion. Councillor Mehta, you have the motion.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Adshade. Public meeting B, as printed, that it go back to staff for a report and recommendation.
You've heard the motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. I declare public meeting B closed. We will move to public meeting C, 45 Blair Road. Presentation will be done by Matthew Blevins, our senior planner. Welcome, Mr. Blevins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, members of committee, staff, and the public. Before you this evening is a statutory public meeting for plan of vacant land condominium for the property at 45 Blair Road. Purpose of the application is to create a condominium corporation before the units themselves are built and to allow the units to be built as they are sold. Notice was given of this meeting in accordance with the Planning Act, and anyone who is interested in receiving notification regarding the proposal is asked to sign the registry at the lower doors. Property in question is 45 Blair Road, the southwest side of Blair Road at the intersection of Blair and Blenheim. And this map is a general representation. The property lines are not necessarily to scale. The purpose of the application is to determine the type of ownership for the units. The built form, number of units, permitted uses, etc. has already received approval through previous applications. The proposed development was reviewed through the site plan application, which received final approval on February 7th of 2019. Previously, the application has received site plan approval through the Ontario Municipal Board in 1998. An application was then filed for severance in 2012. The original proposal considered taking the Dobie House and creating a duplex. The revised proposal severed the Dobie House to be kept as a single detached dwelling, and the Dobie House is a property of interest on the City of Cambridge Heritage Register. Along with that severance application in 2012, there was a site plan application that was submitted. In 2012, Council did approve in principle the site plan with direction to the City Planner to provide final approval of the site plan once the outstanding technical matters had been resolved. The site plan that was approved by the City Planner on February 7th is almost identical to the plan that was approved by Council. There were a few small porches and decks included in the final approved design that were not originally before Council. So just to explain the purpose of the application, there's a little graphic here to try and help understand. The vacant land condominium application will create a common element area, so that would be driveway, parking spaces for visitors, as well as any amenity areas. And then individual parcels of land are created for private ownership. So the vacant land condominium would allow the developer to create the condominium corporation before any of the units are constructed. It would then allow for blocks to be built as they are sold. The developer for this project does a lot of work with very custom finishes on the interior of the units. So this allows them to work with the individual owners to prepare the unit the way they would like it to be built, do the customizations as they sell the blocks, rather than building all of the units, creating the condominium corporation, and then going back in afterwards to do all of their customizations. The recommendation is that City staff continue with the review of the application for condominium and prepare conditions of draft approval for the reasons that are set out in the staff report. I would like to indicate that unlike most other public meetings, there will be no further staff report back to committee or council. The approval or the authority for condominiums is delegated by council to the city planner. And the process is that a letter is created by staff with recommended conditions of approval, signed by the city planner and sent to the Region of Waterloo, who is the approval authority for condominium applications. So I'm happy to address any questions there may be.
Thank you for your presentation. I do have questions. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. So basically, this is no different than a subdivision where they build a house, sell it. They work with the new owner and figure out what it is they want to put in there. It's just that this is a condominium versus that. It's the same type of thing that they're asking for, right?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct, and that is why there's a statutory public meeting required.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Matthew.
Councillor Montero.
Thank you. Through the chair. Matthew, this is a condo complex, but the services, the city services such as water, sewer, since they are individually owned, is our services to the condo complex, to the corporation, not the individual owner?
Through the chair to the councillor, yes. The municipal services come to the edge of the property. There's then what's called, it's loosely referred to as a private water distribution system. Those pipes are the responsibility and the ownership of the condominium corporation. So they are required under our conditions to declare those as what we call common elements under the condominium, so that each of the unit holders pays a proportionate share to maintain those should something happen to them. So it's not an expense that's borne by the city. If something happens to the water pipes on their property, it's paid for by the condominium corporation. If something happens within the right-of-way, then as usual, the city forces would go out and see to those repairs.
Just one more clarification.
Go ahead.
And the meters, the water meters, are they going to be city-owned, or the corporation going to own them? We just supply the main meter and they divide it themselves?
Through the chair to the councillor, I may rely on James here if I get this incorrect, but there would be a water meter chamber within 30 meters of the property line where there would be that principal chamber that's supplied by the city at the applicant's cost. If they wanted to do individual sub-metering, that's something that the condominium corporation would have to pay for and set up. They would also have to retain a firm that would monitor those meters and provide the bills to the individual unit holders.
As long as we're clear on that, because I don't want that to be reborn from other condo corporations that we have in town. Thank you.
I see no further questions, so thank you very much, Mr. Blevins.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We don't have a consultant who come forward on this one, but it is now time for the public. If there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this public meeting, please come forward. Welcome. Could you give us your name and address, please?
Sure. Sorry. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Matthew Warzeka. I'm a planner with GSP Group. I actually am the consultant for the applicant. My apologies, I did not register as a delegate. Mr. Blevins did a fairly comprehensive job explaining the application, but I did want to offer the opportunity to answer any questions or receive any comments that the committee may have.
We do. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up on what Councillor Montero asked, so Matthew, just so I understand that anybody who owns a condominium in this group will understand that the corporation is responsible for the water bill?
Yes, absolutely. They would be included in the declaration.
Thanks. That's been an issue for us in the past. That's why it's important.
Sure. Understood.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just for curiosity, do you know when you're planning to start building, and have you sold any of the blocks?
Any of the units? My understanding is that none of the units have been sold at this point. As Mr. Blevins had noted, they do like to work with individual buyers to customize each of the units internally. As far as construction, they want to get breaking ground as soon as possible. So ideally, we could get in there in the spring.
Okay. Did you say you haven't sold any?
My understanding is that we haven't,
okay.
But to be honest, it's not normally something that I'm involved with as far as pre-sales.
Okay, thank you.
I have no further questions, so thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for the motion. Councillor Wolf, you have the motion.
Through you, Madam Chair, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Adshade. Public meeting report, 45 Blair Road, draft plan of vacant land condominium, Dixon Hill Developments, Ward 5, that city staff continue with the review of the application and preparation of conditions of draft approval for the reasons set out in the report 19-040 CD.
You've heard the motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. I declare public meeting C closed. Now we're going to move to proposed amendments to the 2017 growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which will be presented by April Seward, our Manager of Policy Planning. Welcome, April.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning and Development Committee and staff. I'm here tonight to update you on some proposed amendments to the 2017 Provincial Growth Plan, known as Amendment Number 1. First of all, I'll give you a little bit of background to bring you up to present day. In July 2006, we had the first provincial growth plan that provided municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe area of Ontario with direction on how land use should happen and how development should occur. In 2015, the provincial government conducted a review of not only the growth plan, but also the Niagara Escarpment Plan, the Greenbelt Plan, and the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan. The reason that was done was to bring the four plans into line with each other, because what was happening was municipalities that had overlapping plans had conflicting advice coming from each of them. So that coordinated review resulted in a draft growth plan in 2016 and finally resulted in the 2017 plan that took effect on July 1st in 2017. And today, a year and a half later, we're looking at Amendment 1 to that 2017 growth plan. It should be recognized that municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe area have just started really turning their attention to implementing that 2017 plan. We have until 2022 to get our planning documents at the upper tier into place, and then a year later for the lower tier plans. So some of the changes that are proposed in Amendment 1 by the province include changing the minimum density target for greenfield areas to actually reduce that. So right now, under the current plan, our target for those greenfield areas is 80 people and jobs per hectare. The proposed amendment would bring that down to 60 people and jobs per hectare for our greenfield areas. We see that as positive. It's something that's more achievable for our local municipalities, particularly in Waterloo region, and also recognizing that our greenfield areas are on the edges of the city, and it doesn't make sense to have a lot of density on the edges of the city that we would have to service. So we see that as a positive change, and we had expressed concern at the time the 2017 plan was coming into place that 80 people and jobs per hectare was too high. Secondly, they are shortening the time frame for us to meet our intensification target. So the intensification target is the percentage of new growth that has to occur within the already built up area. Right now, it's 60%. It remains at 60% of that growth to occur in the built-up area. But instead of that happening by 2031, the proposed amendment would have us trying to achieve that target by 2022 at the time that the regional official plan is updated. So that's a shift. It shortened that time frame. I don't think it's going to be difficult for us to achieve that, but just noting that would be one of the changes. The next change is the radius around major transit station areas has increased. So right now, the radius is 500 meters. So we have to meet certain density targets which are higher for major transit station areas within 500 meters. The change would take it out to 800 meters. So that is, again, a positive change for us because it allows us more area within which to meet those density targets. The next item to bring to your attention is that they are allowing us, under certain circumstances, to allow employment land conversion before the next regional official plan review. Right now, in the current growth plan, that's not allowed until there's been an employment strategy done and the regional official plan is updated. Amendment 1 opens up some possibility for some limited employment land conversion. And we see that as a positive thing, as long as we're clear on what the rules are as to who can initiate that and how much there is. One of the criteria in the proposed amendment is that the new land use has to maintain a significant number of jobs on it, and we're not sure what they mean by significant number of jobs and how that would be achieved. We're speculating that it would have to go to some sort of mixed use that includes employment as well as residential. And then at the bottom of this slide, there is limited addition to the urban boundary possible in the amendment. So right now, our urban boundary is set where it's at, and we can't change it until, again, there's a regional official plan review that looks at the urban boundary region-wide. The amendment talks about being able to add up to 40 hectares before that regional official plan is updated. We're not sure whether that is across the region in a situation where we have two-tier, or would each area municipality be allocated 40 hectares. So we've asked for some clarity on that, and also asked that that only be allowed where it's municipally initiated, where we bring forward and say, you know, we think there's justification for adding some land to our urban boundary. We don't think that for Cambridge it'll be something that we'll want to do, because right now we do have ample greenfield land to allow development to occur up until that regional official plan review is done in 2022. Next, they are proposing to add something called the provincially significant employment zone. There are several of them that have been identified across the province. Cambridge has 2. And these provincially significant employment zones would be areas where no employment land conversion could occur until at least the official plan update that I referenced on the previous slide. And I do have some slides later on in my presentation that will show you those proposed provincially significant employment zones and some amendments to the mapping that Cambridge Planning and Economic Development staff will be suggesting. Another change that would happen if Amendment 1 goes through is that they've removed the emphasis on site design and urban design standards. Now, that still exists in the provincial policy statement and in the Planning Act, but they're removing it, or proposing to remove it, from the growth plan. One of the reasons that the site design and urban design standards are important is that the growth plan does direct us towards more intense forms of growth, and good urban design and site design standards are something that, you know, improve the livability of a more dense living environment. They have reduced the environmental ideal of net zero energy communities. So that's been removed from the growth plan through this amendment, and they've replaced it with environmentally sustainable communities. It doesn't mean that a municipality can have net zero energy as one of their goals. It's just that direction's been removed from the provincial growth plan. And finally, the implementation of provincial mapping of the provincial natural heritage and agricultural systems has been delayed, and we're allowed to refine it. One of the concerns that we had with the current growth plan is that there was a layer that was added at a provincial level of natural heritage systems in the agricultural system. And we found when we looked at that at our local scale, it wasn't jiving well with some of the areas that we had where we had more detailed mapping, and so it was really constraining us from allowing some development in areas where really we had done the detailed environmental work at the ground level, but we were constrained by this overlay of provincial mapping. So we see that as positive, and the opportunity to work with the province to refine that mapping before it gets implemented at the next regional official plan review is a positive aspect of the amendment. So I'll go into a little bit of detail now, not too much, I promise, on the provincially significant employment zones. So as I mentioned, there are 2 identified for Cambridge. The first one I'll talk about is Zone 22. They call it East Cambridge. We would call it Central Cambridge. It centers on the 401 and Hespeler Road corridor. You can see the outline of it is the dark black line, and it's overlaid on top of our current official plan layers. So the gray toning are lands that are designated for employment, so you would understand why they would identify it as provincially significant employment zone. But the red and the pink are areas that we've identified as commercial and actually are existing commercial, like the Smart Centre at Hespeler Road and Pine Bush Road. So we've proposed some refinements to this mapping to more reflect what's on the ground and what the future planning in Cambridge is for this area. So this map shows some of the takeaways that we've suggested to be removed from that provincially significant employment zone. Most of it centers around the red and the purple on that map that is that large commercial area. But what happens when you take that out of the center, it really isolates some of the other industrial lands in the light pink to the west. So we end up with the dark hatched area as what we're putting forward to the province as saying that's what we think is the provincially significant employment zone. It doesn't mean that some of the other industrial lands will be changing at all in the future. We just didn't see them as being a provincially significant identified area. The second zone that's been identified for Cambridge is Zone 23, which is called North Cambridge. And much of that land is already existing in planned employment uses. So some of it was the lands that were talked about earlier tonight in your public meeting A for Creekside and Intermarket. So all the gray hatching on this map is lands that either is currently industrial or planned for industrial uses. There's a little bit that's actually in Kitchener that's on the very bottom of the map with that doesn't have any hatching in it, and we've let Kitchener know that some of what they might think is just in Cambridge is actually in Kitchener. They might want to comment on that. And you'll see on this map the suggested changes that we've made are minimal to that mapping, just removing some land that's south of the 401 that we didn't think was provincially significant, and as well adding the little green hatched area at the very top of the map. Those lands are identified in Regional Official Plan Amendment 2 as coming into our employment lands, and then the orange lands at the very top of the map are some that again are in that Regional Official Plan Amendment number 2 that are planned for mixed use development. Oh, sorry, and also there are some small lands along Riverbank Drive in the purple color that are not in the city's urban boundary, so they shouldn't be included as provincially significant employment zone. And those, again, were also talked about earlier tonight in public meeting A. So when we had all these removals, we thought, working with economic development, that there is another area in Cambridge that could be identified as provincially significant employment zone, and that we wouldn't see changing from that at any time in the near future, which is our Eastern Industrial Park. So those are the lands generally south of Clyde Road and east of Franklin Boulevard, and that's the yellow overhatched area on this map that we'll be putting forward to sort of add to those provincially significant employment lands to balance off the lands we were suggesting should be taken away. So the staff recommendation in your report tonight is that you receive it and pass the city's comments on Growth Plan Amendment 1 and the proposed provincially significant employment zones to the province. Our deadline for comments on that is February 28th. So in the report you'll see more detailed comments that we're planning on sending forward on your behalf. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, April. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. April, going back to the property that the gentleman was extremely concerned about here earlier this evening, can you tell me why that is, those lands are to be removed? I know they're not in the city's urban boundaries, but why aren't they?
Through you, Madam Chair, They're not. The city's urban boundary is something that's set region-wide by the regional official plan. Those lands have never been in the city's urban boundary. The lands that are along Riverbank Drive.
So what was, just follow up, so what would be the reason? Because when I look at that, and it looks like there is a house that's tucked back on that property, I understand that it's not, and that it's the way it is with the region, but why would that have happened?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can't answer that question. It's something that we've been wondering as well. But there was a strip of land along Riverbank Drive that was left out of the urban boundary when the Prime Industrial Strategic Reserve was brought in. It was a regional official plan amendment maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay, because it doesn't make sense at all, so thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I think Councillor Mann, you have the motion.
I do, Madam Chair, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Liggett, that the proposed Amendment 1 to the 2017 Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe be accepted as printed.
Thank you. Councillor Mehta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with a lot of staff's analysis. I think it was really well done. I just wanted to make a general comment that there has been a lot of interest in our brownfield sites, seeing them redeveloped, and the major hurdle, it hasn't actually been the contamination because we have very good policies. The hurdle has been the zoning. So this should hopefully create some more flexibility that we can get some mixed-use development on those sites and get more, get people living where they work and get, like help boost our downtowns up more. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen as part of the process. Thank you.
Okay, we've heard the motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, we will move to Clover Avenue street lighting. And I have some delegations who wish to speak to that. I would like to call forward Don Joseph.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Council. Clover Ave is a small nine-home street which each resident bought their home due to the rural feel, natural habitat, and existing dead end. It has been a residential street for over 50 years, with most people not knowing it is nestled among the trees and nature. Each has sufficient lighting on their homes to see at night. We feel that street lights are not required. We used to be able to sit in our yards and enjoy the moon, stars, fireflies, etc. With the new LED street lights, our yards are lit up enough you could have a night baseball game as if you were in Churchill Park. The lights are extremely bright in the yards and shine through the windows into our homes much brighter than required. We would say excessively bright. We understand LED lighting is cost efficient, but has also been proven medically to be a sleep disruptor, amongst other issues. We received a letter in late December saying we would be getting street lights, and before we as residents on the street could talk and call in regards to them, they were already installed. To us, it seemed it was extremely rushed. When we contacted City Hall, we were told there was nothing we could do about it. No action could be taken. We contacted Ward 7 Councillor Frank Montero, whose name was also listed on our letter. We were told when campaigning he had someone on the street mention there were no street lights. As you can see by the signed petition of the remaining people of the street, they oppose the street lights. We don't understand how one person can ask for street lights and there's no consideration for the entire rest of the street. The residents on Clover Ave purchased their forever homes for the rural and peaceful country and the city feel. Unfortunately, we feel now that our City Council has made decisions and forged ahead with no concerns for us, the residents. We find this to be disappointing and concerning as residents of Cambridge. Our beautiful rural-like yards we choose to relax in after a long, hard day are no more. We request the streetlights be removed so we can return to our natural cohabitation with the beautiful nature of our neighborhood. We would like to thank you at this time for your attention to this matter, representing all of the residents of Clover Avenue.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joseph. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Liggett.
I have a question of staff. Can I ask it now, or?
Yes, you may.
How long has this been in the works? And is there any avenue for residents to be given notification of it so that they can be part of the discussion of it? And I'm just wondering why the recommendation, as well as to be maintained and operated, if they're already in, that would be our duty to do anyway. So can you just bring that all into?
I think that James Etienne, could you respond to that, please?
Through the chair. First of all, we were notified of this in late October and conducted our investigations to look into what the situation was out there. We concluded that there were no street lights. And we put in a request to get a cost estimate. We sent a letter out to residents and put forward a request for installation. We were told actually that it would take 4 to 6 weeks to get the installation in, and it actually happened a lot quicker than we expected. So unfortunately, that was an unfortunate timing in that we didn't receive the actual petition until after the lights had been installed.
So if the letter went out to the residents on December 6th,
yeah,
they were installed, you said, within 4 weeks?
They were installed, I believe, on January 7th.
Yeah, that is pretty fast. So the residents are never, do we not ever check with the residents on the street if it's that type of a community?
Through you, Madam Chair, again, our process is just to advise people that we're in the process of doing an installation. There's not a request process for public consultation, so to speak.
One other follow-up question to Mr. Etienne, thank you. So I guess I'm concerned because I don't know what they were told on the phone, that there was nothing that could be done about that. So, and I think that seems to be part of the problem here. Is that the case in this case?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't know exactly what the context of what couldn't be done. I think it may have been to the statement that they've already been put in. We can't not put them in, but we did turn around very quickly to contact the neighborhood to advise them that we would bring their petition forward to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you. My other question that I'd asked earlier that I didn't hear you address, I don't remember ever getting a recommendation that's written like this, where it says that the lights are to be maintained and operated as to the city's engineering standards. Do we get that normally? I just don't remember that.
Through you, Madam Chair, again, the recommendation recognizes that our standard is to have lighted public right-of-ways, and in terms of being asked, should we have lights or not, it is our standard where possible to install lights.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Sorry.
I'm just asking, I don't remember ever getting a recommendation where we're being asked to vote on accept a recommendation that the lights be maintained and operated by the city, because I thought that would be a done deal. That would be just common sense that would follow through. So have I just missed it before? Just curious, I've just not seen it.
Yeah, I'm not sure, if we've done anything like that before. No, sorry.
Okay, all right, thanks.
We have a number of people who have questions. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Thanks for your explanation, James. Just what is our standard procedure or practice then when homes are built on a street? Does the infrastructure include lighting of that street, any street where we put homes? Is that the procedure that we would follow as a city, as a corporation?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is our standard.
Thank you.
Councillor Adshade.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and Don, thanks for coming forward this evening. When I read through the package for the meeting, there must have been some people that wanted lighting, obviously, but I guess my question to you is, I guess your biggest concern is that it's too bright and it's shining in your house at night, but when I read through the package, there's a chance that the angle could be, in the fixture could be adjusted so it wouldn't be as bright. If that was possible, would that satisfy you then?
Quite honestly, we didn't want the lights there in the first place. What had happened was there was a home on our street. It was purchased, demolished, and 2 homes were squeezed in that property. And it was one of those residents that wanted it. If the city is going to stand by, well, now that they're in, they can't come out, there needs to be adjustments, because it is, as I said, no word of a lie. We could be playing a ball game in our front street, and that light reflects into the back of the home as well. It's the residents bought on this street for the fact that there is the pond and there is everything, and it's to be with nature. And if the lights aren't coming out, are the residents of the street going to be happy? I'm going to tell you, no, they're not. And as you did say, we feel blindsided. We felt that we had the opportunity to make phone calls and we're told, nope, basically done deal. But if taking them out is not a possibility, some action has to be taken to reduce how bright they are. They do not need to be that bright on that short of a street. Like, as I said, 9 houses in total on 2 sides of a street. Not a big street. But something has to be done. Something has to be looked at, and some kind of agreement has to happen. Okay?
Thank you. I will move on to Councillor Montero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ma'am, was that you that called me on the phone?
Oh, yes. I have no qualms. No qualms. It was me.
Okay.
And as we say, we understand the LEDs are there. We understand development happens. Don't think we're a bunch of people that are unreasonable, crazy residents of Cambridge, because we do understand you have a job, and we do understand that there has to be some kind of neutral ground there.
And you do remember what I said to you?
Yeah. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Thank you.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wonder, thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
And I wondered tonight if we could just give direction to staff to maybe readjust those lights. I know that you can put a shade on it or just readjust it so that it focuses more onto the road than it does into neighbors' homes. And that might be the solution, or part of a solution that we can come up with to help with the situation.
I'm not sure direction is the answer. Let's see what James says, what could be done as far as reducing the light there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have talked to Energy Plus, and they certainly can redirect and do some additional shielding of the particular light in front of Mrs. Joseph's, or any of them for that matter. There's 4 of them on that street.
So it looks as though that can happen, and if this council would like to direct that to happen, then we can do that. I'm seeing nods, so I'm going to take that as an affirmative. Oh, Mayor McGarry, you're going to have to put her on because I got Councillor Liggett.
Thank you very much. Just along that same line, is it feasible that maybe even half the lights are disconnected? Just 1 or 2 are left and the others are just disconnected? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Again, the installations, it's not a standard installation on that street. The installations took best advantage of existing hydro poles, so it did, dramatically minimize the cost of putting in the fixtures. There's the types of lighting that has been installed is specific to residential streets as opposed to the arterial streets, for example on Myers Road, where the lighting would be significantly more wattage and again designed to light a greater area. So I don't know exactly what would be the impact of selectively changing some of the lighting. Obviously we could investigate that.
Thank you. To Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have we done, I remember bringing this up before, and I think the answer is no, but I just want to have it reaffirmed. Have we done a light pollution study and created a policy? I know other communities have, but
I'm looking, so who can answer that question? James.
Through you, Madam Chair, not to my knowledge. And again, in terms of light pollution, these new fixtures, and these are consistent with all the fixtures that we have put in, are designed to be an improvement over the previous lighting systems that we had. They're designed to direct light downward only, and not to in terms of direct it up or as much as possible not away from the street. So it is that consideration has been built into the design of the current retrofits that we have in place.
That's not my concern, sorry. My concern is within the city as a whole, even on private properties. We recently had, and as Ms. Fries knows, we had a problem in my ward to do with a large entity with the agreements that had been done years ago to do with what they were doing with their lights in their parking lot. And we've had complaints from the residents. I think it's been fixed since then, and Ms. Fries has done a good job at that. But my concern is as the city as a whole, not necessarily on city streets, we don't have any type of policies, correct, as to private properties. I think it's something we should at least explore for future.
Thank you. Would you like to? Yeah.
So just in response to your question, I can't speak to the city-owned properties and street lighting, but on private properties, we do require zero light spill. There is a small percentage of light spill that's allowed at property lines adjacent to municipal roads, but at all property lines adjacent to other property owners, there is a zero light spill allowed. Is that answering your question?
So does that cover just residential or commercial, industrial, or all of it?
Through you, Madam Chair, it covers all types of development.
So
on private property, yeah.
Okay, so you don't see a need for a whole policy strictly on that, so that we explore all of the avenues of light pollution as they affect people's health, that sort of thing, like other communities have done? Just a question.
Through you, Madam Chair, like we do have that standard for any new developments on private properties. We don't have any standard for light spill going up, but just how it affects the other adjacent properties. So we do have that in place already.
Okay, thanks.
I had you, Councillor Montero, and I lost you.
Thank you. I'm lit up. Madam Chair, I have the motion for this, and would you like, I feel that I have an explanation to give regarding to this installation of these lights. Should I do it now or after I present the...
I have another delegation, so after the second delegation, it would be more proper to bring forward.
Thank you.
Okay. The second delegation is Bill Zachary. Would you come forward? Oh. Well, he is not here at this present time, so please, Councillor Montero, bring forward your motion.
Madam Chair, a motion was moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Adshade. It's Clover Avenue street lighting, that the report Clover Avenue street lighting be received for information, and that the street lights installed on Clover Avenue be maintained and operated as per the city's engineering standards and development manual. What happened here was during the campaign, our last election, in about October, early October, I was on Clover Avenue doing some door knocking. There was two individuals in front of a house. There were newer houses, yes. And as I was walking down the street and speaking to those people, they said, "Hey, Frank, when are you going to install street lights?" I had no idea they had no street lights. So I look up and says, "In fact, you don't have street lights." I even said to them, says, "Leave it with me, I'll make the proper arrangements." So I did, contacted staff, James Etienne Hardy, and advised them that this particular street had no street lights, and that the individuals I was speaking to, there was a safety issue. At night they couldn't see anything because the street, it's a very short street, 9 to 10 houses I think it is. There's an empty lot, a double lot, but other than that, they arranged to have the street lights installed. Meantime, I received a phone call by this lady, and she identified as the caller, advising me that she didn't want any street lights. I says, "Well, a couple of your neighbors want street lights, and that's why you were notified." So at the particular time, I contacted, I told her, says, "Look, get your neighbors together, send me something that you don't want street lights." So when I contacted staff, in particular James Etienne, I says, "The street lights on Clover, when they're going to be installed?" And this is, "I think we already put the order in, but I think they're going to install them in the next few days." I received the letter January 9th. At least that's the date on it. Whether I get it on the 9th or the 10th, I'm not sure. Shortly after, James contacted me and says, "Frank, the street lights are already installed." So I said, talk about efficiency. And we're known, City Hall is known for the wheels of City Hall moving slowly, but this time they actually moved pretty quick. So the street lights were up. So I was kind of concerned at the time because, you know, they're up. What are we going to do now? I did make a point to drive over there at night to see how bright they were. So I went there. Well, they're no brighter than any other street. Could they be adjusted? Yes. But again, it's one of these things. Be damned if you do, be damned if you don't. I thought I was doing the right thing by responding to the request of streetlights to a street that didn't have any. In that particular street, years ago, it used to be rural. That's the old Myers Road. I even remember Myers Road even having farms on Myers Road. Well, it's now part of the urban, it's part of the city. So I really, if the residents don't want the street lights, it's fine. But the thing is that there's a situation here that some do and some don't. I think that streets should have street lights. It's a safety issue, and that's what I was told. There was they were concerned about being too dark, and that's why I had them installed. I leave it to all of you. I'm of the opinion that it should be adjusted. I had another situation similar with street lights aiming to the people's property, and after arrangements were made with staff, Cambridge Hydro adjusted them. In one particular case, they even put a shade on one of them so that it didn't go to their backyard. Again, in the same area, Myers Road, and a lot of those streets that back onto Myers Road. So, but at the end of the day, I think that a street in the city, and especially a street, they have no sidewalks. You walk on the street. So I think you should have street lights. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, we have the motion before us. I think that along with the motion, we have given direction. I think that is from all of you, direction to talk to James Etchen and see what can be done in order to compromise the light that is there. So that's not a part of the motion, but it is a part of direction that we are giving. So given that, are we ready to vote? It looks like we are. Those in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Councillor Ameta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Agenda as printed.
Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. I would direct your attention to correspondence. I think it's important that you are aware of the correspondence from the city and Elaine Brunshaw to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing about increasing the housing supply. And any unfinished business? Non-jurisdictional items? So we're looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Liggett.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mann, that this meeting is adjourned at 8:18 p.m.
Those in favor? Meeting is adjourned.